From the Advocate magazine in partnership with GLAAD, I'm Jeffrey Masters, and this is LGBTQ&A. Today, Rufus Wainwright is here to talk about his rather interesting career. He is one of the very first mainstream singers to start their career out of the closet. This was back in 1998. And, now we have more out singers than we can count, thank God, right? But in the 90s and the early 2000s, this was rare. And as you'll hear Rufus say, he saw that for people who weren't out or who didn't bring up their sexuality per se, they definitely went further in their careers. So we talk about that, about what's changed, what hasn't, and of course we talk about his brand new album, Unfollow The Rules. That is out this week. Now, if you enjoyed this interview, please help us to spread the word on social media or text your group chats. Doing things like that is a huge way to help our show grow, so thank you so much to everyone for that. All right, here is Rufus. Your first album came out in 1998, and I have to tell you, looking back, I think it's wild that professionally you've never been in the closet.
Right. It's something that I actually had to fight for a little bit at certain points in my career. I mean, when I started in 98, the first meeting I took with my record company, with DreamWorks Records, I emphatically stated to them that I was gay and that I wasn't going to hide that, and that as long as they understand that, we can keep going. And they agreed, and we were then off to the races. So, I don't claim to be the first out gay artist, but I am one of the first who started my career being out, on a major label, and who also, succeeded, in the sense I've remained. There was some talk about, how Adam Lambert was like this incredible pioneer of being like the first out gay mainstream artist or something, and with all due respect to Adam Lambert, who's very talented and a great guy, but I got very angry about that. I was like, no, I kind of did it about 15 years earlier,
Yeah.
Or 10 years earlier than him. So it's good that you started with that point, because I had to sort of really I've had to sort of nail it home a few times.
And I think what is also so impressive is that you were not just out but didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It was very overt. Your first album had a song called Danny Boy,
Yeah.
singing about a male love interest.
I was. And what's interesting about it is that it was overt, but it wasn't the centerpiece of my life either. I mean, I was, we weren't going, I wasn't trying to garner more gay fans, or it wasn't sort of this. I was just like a songwriter first and foremost, and my homosexuality was just an element of my personality, along with other things, which I actually think took the industry off guard in a good way. They didn't quite know how to kind of destroy me because I wasn't so pointed about it, but I was just very plain about it. It just wasn't like such a big deal for me, and I was truthful.
So it wasn't such a big deal to you, but did the press and the industry make it seem like you were gay first, like a gay singer instead of just a singer?
Yeah, I mean they were, how can I say this? Certain outlets were I don't know, hung up on it a little bit, and I do believe that there was, in terms of how the industry works, there was certain opportunities that I was not allowed to have. I was kind of put back a little bit by my sexuality. I wasn't by any means, obliterated, but I was dismissed somewhat as this, how can I say this, off-center, unusual creature. And so that was what it was. I mean, I kind of worked with that energy, and it made me fight harder. It made me write more songs. It made me try, really hone my craft. So it was, honestly, I think they were more confused than anything else, because I was just so matter of fact about it.
I think I'm surprised to hear you say that you were dismissed, because it seems like looking back at your career, there was so much momentum from the very early on.
Yeah. How can I say this? There was always this line that would come up where they're like, "Can you just pretend to be bisexual at least?" Or they didn't necessarily want to take the risk of like alienating a certain sector of the mainstream audience with me. But I was always shocked at how, if you do just not bring it up, even if it's like plainly obvious, you do go that much further in the pop world, and it's interesting. I mean, it's I don't know if I would have ever been a huge pop star regardless, I think it's a bigger sort of element than it's given credit for.
It's so interesting you say that because I discovered your music during the Want 1 and 2 albums when they came out.
Yeah.
But, information accessibility was so different back then that there was no internet for me to look up and see, like, what is this guy's sexuality?
Yeah, yeah. I was as gay as the day is long, especially these days. Uh, and I very much took that opportunity to, indulge in my myself and all the trappings of rock and roll success that I did get at that early stage in my career.
Do you still indulge in those things?
Well, I mean, I'm married now, and we have a child, and I'm certainly not going on the road anytime soon. So it's quieted down a bit. But I've always been. How can I say this? I have a kind of Hindu belief. I'm not Hindu, but there is this kind of more Eastern philosophy where an individual is comprised of many people, and many different facets. And yeah, there are times when my the more whatever naughty Rufus can show his head suddenly, and I have to contend with that. But it's just not enough hours in the day, unfortunately.
Your parents are also musicians, and I
Yes.
think we would probably both agree that your career has surpassed what theirs were, just like factually.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I wonder if growing up with musicians as parents, if you looked at their careers as something you wanted to surpass.
Well, I mean, how can I say this? I mean, I think one always wants to surpass their parents. And I think one's parents always want their kids to surpass them. I mean, I think it's the natural order of things. I mean, my parents are. My mother sadly is no longer with us, Kate McGarrigle, but both of my parents were, and my dad still is, great musicians and really valued songwriters, and did incredibly well. Now, neither of them became, household names by any means. And so when my star was on the ascent, let's just say the mountain I had to jump over wasn't in the Himalayas. Unlike friends of mine, like Sean Lennon or Adam Cohen, whose parents were, bona fide superstars, and they never, and it would have been churlish to imagine them even, you know, going anywhere near their parents' fame. So I had an easier time of it because my parents were not super famous, but they were incredibly respected, and in my opinion, just as talented as any big time person. But yes, I wanted to supersede them, but I don't know, I wanted to bring them along as well. Like it was as much my intention to become more famous, and to also show other people their greatness as well, who were not familiar with their work. Especially my mother. I mean, my mother, because she decided to really focus on bringing up her kids as opposed to touring. She lost a lot of opportunities in that department. So I then sang a lot of her material and would always bring her along, and really champion her.
Did they teach you like basics, just like the basics of a songwriting?
Well, my mother did, and watching my father was always an education. I did witness my parents go down the edge of fame. My father was very, very successful in this when I was very, very young, and then times changed, and he had to really struggle for years. Then he had some ups and downs, but that in itself was an amazing education. For me growing up, I never had any kind of illusions of what a musical career looked like. You had good times, you had bad times, and you just had to make it about the work, and you had to just soldier on, and you had to be pretty tough. So I learned that from both my parents.
So, am I wrong then to connect that level of thinking to to what I've seen in your career, which I think is somebody who has done really surprising things. You know, you've written opera, you put out an album of Shakespeare sonnets instead of music. I feel like you don't put out an album like that hoping it'll sell, millions and millions of copies.
No, I don't. I will say that there's a very foolish side of myself that does believe before any record of mine comes out, whether it's a pop record or the Shakespeare album or even my opera, that somehow there's going to be this magical moment where suddenly it's the most it's the most famous and most acclaimed and most accepted and widely sold album I've ever made. You always have that second or two of disbelief, and then of course reality sets in.
And I guess, like, from my perspective, I just see an artist who's not making the most commercial decisions.
No, no. Artistically, I can only do what I want to do, mainly because my desire to do that is so strong. I mean, I'm really overtaken with inspiration, whether it's doing a Shakespeare sonnet or writing an opera or doing a pop song. Like in that moment, I'm going full throttle ahead. And then, of course, you make the recording and you think, oh, well, of course, the world is also obsessed with, Sonnet 29. And when I release it, I'll be able to buy that house in Malibu. It's just like it's crooked thinking, but it gets the work done.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like you don't have like a dry spells of inspiration. You have like too much inspiration.
So I wouldn't say I have too much, but I am constantly inspired, and I do. It's interesting because this period now of quarantine and the pandemic, and I will emphatically state that any artist in this period who has not benefited from having this time and having this kind of perspective and having this moment to really go inside and to really either practice or write or draw, really use their art to their advantage, they're not really artists. I mean, it's like time is so valuable for an artist, and that's why historically a lot of that usually had to be rich, because they had to be leisurely, in order to really work and on what they wanted to do. So I think that this couple of months has been very valuable artistically for anybody who wants to do that as a profession. I mean, yes, now the money's drying up, but this last period, 2 months, was a gift in a certain ways.
With money things, is money something that you still worry about?
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I've done well, and thankfully, before the pandemic, I had been working a lot over the last 3 years, so I managed to put some cash away, and I'm going to be okay for the next little while, and yeah, I'm pretty much hand to mouth. I also live quite lavishly in the sense that I love. My husband and I love, going to the opera. We love eating in nice restaurants. We love travel. I mean, if I was more frugal, it'd probably be better. And there's a very good chance we'll have to become more frugal, to be honest.
Is that because live performance won't be coming back for a
Oh,
while?
yeah. And I'm hopeful that there are other avenues because of my compositional skills and my ability to really work, in film and television as well, and also my love of opera and classical music, which does require like a longer lead in general, and so I'll be occupied. I'll be fine.
We were talking about inspiration earlier. At this point in your life, you've been with your husband for like, is it 13 years?
Been together for about 15 years.
15. So much of your music in the past has been about love, relationships, yearning, unrequited all aspects. Does a long-term relationship like the one you're in, has that provided as much fodder for inspiration for your music?
Oh, very much so. I mean, it's whether it's just the trials and tribulations of keeping house or taking care of elderly parents and of course young children. I mean, the drama ensconced in that is formidable. So I can be, and whether it's dreaming of escaping from that, at times, which all adults do, or embracing it and championing it, that's a pretty wide spectrum. That being said, there is something to be said for really using your imagination and creating universes that aren't attached to you and that you're just sort of observing.
Is there a song in your new album that you've taken that advice for that isn't about you or your life?
Well, Trouble in Paradise is a bit that. I mean, I wrote that for a play, and that's loosely based on something that maybe Anna Wintour could sing. It's sort of about her, but of course, the chorus, Trouble in Paradise is pretty universal at the moment.
It's so interesting looking at just like the track list right now, in the middle of a pandemic. Songs like Early Morning Sadness, Alone Time, Hatred, they all seem to be speaking directly to this moment.
Yeah, no, they are. I mean, it's funny because even I was a little worried when the album was coming out, with the title "Unfollow the Rules," because a few weeks ago that was not a good message to put forth in terms of the pandemic. It was a follow the rules moment, but of course now that's all changed. With the demonstrations and the protests. So now we are in an unfollow the rules moment, and yeah, no, there's a lot of correlation, which I don't know. I don't know what that means. I mean, I always try to write about, heavy shit, and we live in heavy times right now, so maybe that's just the whatever the binding there.
Yeah. With songs that are not about you or your life versus ones that are, do you think that people connect to songs that you've written about your personal experience, or is just a good song a good song?
I think the prime example for me of a song that has nothing to do with myself, and that's a complete construct, is the Art Teacher. I don't know if you know that song, but I've sung it now for years. That's from Want To, and people just go wild for that song, and it has, as I said, it's just like a kind of a fantasy where I'm, a young girl in boarding schools, which we all imagine sometimes. So yeah, so I think it's just a good song is a good song.
And how much does your love of opera influence your like pop songwriting?
I make a conscious effort not to directly, correlate those two worlds because they're very different and they actually have nothing to do with each other in a lot of ways. But that being said, traveling from one to the other, I always bring, dust along with me, and it does seep into the woodwork, of either one. So I know it's happening, but I don't try to like equate them ever. In fact, I think that's kind of futile and can be kind of lame when people try to do that.
Well, actually, though, like I think one of my favorite Freddie Mercury songs is the duet he sings with the famous soprano.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love Freddie Mercury. That's not one of my favorites, though. If you're gonna write opera, it's got to be really opera, and if you're gonna write pop, it's got to be really pop. But that's my style. I mean, it's Freddie Mercury could get away with that, obviously. I don't know. It's just not an area that I inhabit much.
And we're talking about your songwriting, but with your like voice itself, has it changed as you've gotten older?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I think that's one of the kind of components to this record and to this period in my life is that I have finally kind of hit the summit of my voice. It's my breathing is reasonable. My tone is measured. I know how to like map out a performance with a song now really well. This is after years of singing Judy Garland and studying opera. This is the time when the voice is at its full power, and that's very exciting. That's very exciting for me and it's funny because it is very related to the opera world. I mean, in the pop world, they don't really know about this as much, but in the classical world, it's really in your 40s when you sing your best. That's when you're on the runway
Is that for men and women?
for men and women. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yes. But I mean, with the big roles, like all the Wagner and the Verdi and the kind of challenging roles, you have to be of a certain age to sing them properly, or you destroy your voice. It takes years of training. And I'm a little bit in that department right now. I mean, I don't think I've done it consciously necessarily, but I've followed a lot of tips and just been mindful about it.
Yeah. I called your songwriting pop songwriting earlier. Do you even consider yourself to be like a pop singer?
Well, I mean, I think that I have. How can I say this? I have the what is it? Occasionally I have the common touch, as they say, where I will do something that strikes a kind of frequency in a general population, whether it's when I did Hallelujah or Cigarettes and Chocolate Milk. There are and it kind of, I don't know, there's some kind of spark that ignites and just, and there's an immediacy to it that is pop-like. I don't know, there is something poppy about me. I haven't been able to nail it. We'll see one day, perhaps someone will.
With the songs you just mentioned, those are from like older records. Are you hoping to like achieve that kind of track in every album you do?
Yeah, I mean, I usually try with every album to have one or two really iconic tracks. I mean, that is the point. But I do think that, Unfollow the Rules, the title track, is one of these pieces of music that you just put forth and you're like, this is undeniable, this song. And in a weird way, Hatred is sort of the opposite of that. It's something that, you can put on the radio and that does relate to, the energy around today and is very much of this time, though it's completely a Baroque tune as well.
I kind of gravitated towards Peaceful Afternoon. I think what I was saying earlier about like a long-term relationship, I hadn't heard that sung about so specifically.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's that song really strikes a chord with a lot of people. Because it is, what can I say? It's something that a lot of people wish for, and then other people need to celebrate. Who have been in one. And then there's other people who don't give a shit. But I think for those who are gravitate towards that piece of music, it's a strong emotion that it engenders.
And I think that for like gay people, we don't have that many public examples of long-term relationships.
There's not a lot. I am still very, how can I say it, liberal or even old-fashioned in my beliefs about the gay existence. I respect our history tremendously and all of the craziness that comes with it. And so I don't consider the fact that I've been in a relationship for a long time to makes me any better than anybody else. But on the other hand, yeah, it's good to celebrate it, and I think there are people who appreciate that I am, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also a great place to stop. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
And that was Rufus Wainwright. His new album is called Unfollow The Rules. It's available on July 10th. You can also hear Rufus on a previous episode of this podcast. He was here for our special interview with Renee Zellweger, talking all about the gay icon Judy Garland.
It felt like this tangible celebration of her and her spirit and her humor and her wit and her just originality and her gift. It was a kick in the pants. I got a kick in the pants and taught some very necessary lessons.
After that conversation, Renee went on to win the Academy Award for that role, so if anyone asks, I take full credit for that win. Now, I say this every week because it's important, but please take 30 seconds and leave a rating and a review on iTunes. Preferably a 5-star rating and preferably a positive review. A lot of people have been doing that recently, and it's really a big, big help in helping us continue to grow, so thank you so much for that. This podcast is brought to you by The Advocate magazine in partnership with GLAAD. Come check out all of our amazing work at advocate.com and glad.org. I'm Jeffrey Masters, and I'll see you next week. Bye.